Hello, I'm Dr. Thomas Maples, and welcome to A Sacred Journey. I'm currently testing out this software and this program just to see if it's a viable method to be able to work with individuals around general psychological questions that they may have, or specifically specifically things as it relates to working with creating optimal health and creating an environment where we could begin to pursue self-realized development. Now, in psychology, Carl Jung was a theoretician, and he was one of the original innovators around psychology in general. He worked with Dr. Sigmund Freud, and he coined a term back in the early 1900s called self-realization. And what self-realization is, it's this aspect of realizing our inner potential. Now, a lot of individuals after Carl Jung um, joined in on this quest to find what is ultimate potential as it relates to our human life and human capacity. And the goal of this vlog is really that I'm seeing how this interacts with also my podcast, which is a sacred journey as well, and seeing the viability of how this is with being able to communicate with individuals interactively, as well as working around how we create values within life, how we utilize the values we may have to better ourselves, better our families, better our communities, and better the world at large. It truly is my goal as a as a working professional to realize potential and to help other individuals realize their potential. And so today's topic that I wanted to begin exploring was working the paradox. When we talk about psychological growth, we're often posed with two opposing sides. We see this a lot in everyday interaction, whether it be relationships that which could cause conflict or argument, or if it is in politics, which creates a lot of conflict and argument, or in other hot topics like religion or money or things to that nature. Often, what we see is two opposing sides, and when we have a paradox present, the key within Buddhist term or Buddhist ideology, when you have two opposing forces, to try and find the middle way. Now, in the psychology of dialectic behavior therapy, which is a form of psychological treatment, they look at this concept as being an aspect of mindfulness, and it very much is. And so when we find middle ground, we're actually trying to extend an olive branch the in between the opposing forces. Not that one side will fully come over to the next or vice versa, but to find middle grounds where both sides can feel heard, can feel validated, as well as working through individual growth as well as the relational growth that occurs by both sides finding middle ground. Now, how do we do that? One of the things that I'm often presented with is two opposing arguments. Now, opposing arguments can occur both intrapersonally, which is at the intrapsychic level, that's inside the self, which could be an example of which would be something to the nature of, let's say, anxieties created around where we're not versus where we want to be. And so we may have an opposing force between the present moment and the idea of where we want to be. An example here is my experimenting with this as a forum to see if this is where I'm at now could somehow move into an aspect of where I want to be and being able to interact with individuals. Now, if that is the case, then this reality will occur. If it's not the case, I have to go back to the drawing board at an intrapsychic level and see what kind of tools or what kind of things I may need to create in order to move the reality into the place where I want. Now, that's an intrapsychic conflict. An intrapersonal conflict, it's a little different. That's usually two opposing forces, people per se. It could be ideologies, it could be move up the spectrum, and really to see where the middle ground exists. Now, when we're dealing with interpersonal conflicts, really there's a set of values that's present that may be opposed to a set of values that's present over here. Now, either of these values aren't necessarily right or wrong, and very rarely will a person abandon values and the foundations from which they are raised to come wholeheartedly into a separate alternate position. And so the key around this is really to find elements where there can be growth, where there can be movement. Now, what individuals want is simply to be heard. Okay. It doesn't matter if it's parents dealing with children, teachers dealing with children, adults dealing with adults, children dealing with children. They want to be heard. And so when we begin to look at the themes of when we begin to look at the themes of arguments that can arise, part of what we look at is an ideal of active listening. Now, this is an ideal. Okay, it's not shown to be that effective per se, research base wise, in resolving conflicts between individuals. But the actual skill of active listening can help a person begin to repeat elements of what's being said so the person feels heard and recognized enough to be able to do the same. Now, the reason why sometimes conflicts won't resolve in that essence is because the value based may be completely different. And if the value based is completely different, what ends up happening, there may not be movement in there, but at least within the interaction, both parties felt heard and they don't feel ostracized or they don't feel pushed away from their opinion being voiced as well. Now, within interpersonal relationships, such as marriages or whatnot, when two opposing forces come together in a conflict, let's say, what ends up happening is that they're trying to create movement towards middle ground. There's one theme here, there's another theme here, and then they try and move it towards getting the other person either join and align on their side or find something where the relationship has the capacity to grow. I'm talking with my hands in a lot of ways because there's Venn diagrams. There's your circle, there's the other circle, and there's a meeting between the two that has the element for growth in both. Now, if the values do not change, what can happen in the element of hearing the other's opinion and hearing the other's argument, growth potential can occur just by seeing the aspects of the other's argument or the other's values, and then being able to understand that ideology a little more, even though it may differ than yours. Now, how do we work this as it relates to the rules of paradox? Sometimes we have to make room. If our values based doesn't leave room for any growth or any growth potential, our life becomes stagnant. And this is where a lot of people get stuck in general. If the glass is all the way full and there's nothing more to fill, there's no information that's coming in to create any form of abundance. And this is where a lot of people may see something that they're gravitating towards, be actively moving towards it, but then get stuck along the way because there's an aspect of there's nothing left to learn. There's always something left to learn. And so sometimes we got to make room in our individual lives to create the dynamics needed for individual growth. Now, one of the things that stood out to me the other day when I was putting this together was the element of boundary setting as it relates to working the paradox, especially interpersonally and intrapersonally. We have to set boundaries amongst ourselves and we have to set boundaries amongst others. If we're a yes person, we say yes to everything. Sometimes we may need to say no just to create some dynamic growth through room available for ourselves. Because a lot of times when we say yes, 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 we're not necessarily serving ourselves. We may have originally served an intrapsychic need to be accepted or whatnot, but what ends up happening is that if we have a habit of saying yes and we don't check that habit every now and then, we simply become a yes person. And from that perspective, in learning to say no, we can free up some time to begin to experiment maybe with some alternate forms of happiness habits that may prompt our development forward. Now, there's other individuals that tend to be no people. Okay, they say no to everything. Parents, I see this like quite often with their children. Now, when a parent says no, 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 as the Netflix movie says, maybe it's time for a yes day. Maybe it's time to let go. There may be some element of control that's needed where that aspect of saying no to everything is creating a constriction within the family to where some personal growth can maybe flourish just in that process of letting go. As the movie shows, as it relates to a yes day, when you begin to say yes to certain things, especially if you have a no ideology working the paradox, what happens is you shift the energy. You shift it from a point of negation to a point of bringing within. And that's a very important part as it relates to not only our dynamic growth at the intrapsychic level, but also with our interpersonal growth working with others, because these two elements are very much, they very much overlay. Today, we began to explore aspects of surfing the paradox. Like I said, I'm testing out this forum to see if this is something that may be viable, especially as it relates to chatting or seeing what the live stream capacity can do. I hope you enjoyed. In my blog and in my podcast, I always leave my listeners with a greeting as well as a farewell. I believe full heartedly in the Hawaiian tradition that there is no goodbyes. With that being said, I wish you many blessings, friends, and I hope that this video may help a little. If it does, please leave a comment, please like, please subscribe, and if you have questions, please leave them in the comments, and I'd be happy to discuss them live, especially on a forum such as this, as I'm testing this out right now. Until next time, I wish you many blessings, and may beauty and joy find you on your journey to advance confidently in the direction of your dreams. Thank you for now.